I'm Sammy Wilson, 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family has conveniently forgotten my birthday, while throwing extravagant celebrations for my younger sister Amber. Ballrooms DJs 5-tier cakes the works. Years of swallowing disappointment taught me something valuable though. This year, instead of reminding them or complaining, I quietly closed on a beachfront condo I'd been saving for. When I casually posted photos on social media, their reactions came fast and furious. Before I dive into this story, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to create your own celebration when others forgot what matters to you. Growing up in a middle-class suburb in Connecticut shaped my earliest understanding of family dynamics. Our home on Maple Street wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable, a 4-bedroom colonial with a backyard that backed up to a small wooded area where I'd often escape to when the house felt too crowded with Amber's presence. My parents, Douglas and Catherine Wilson, were hard-working professionals. Dad, an accountant, and Mom, a high school English teacher, who provided everything we needed materially. What I didn't realize until later was how unevenly their emotional attention was distributed. My early birthday memories follow a predictable pattern. At age 5, Mom promised a small party at the local pizza place with 4 friends. 2 days before Amber developed a slight fever, and everything was canceled. "We'll make it up to you" became a familiar refrain. By 6, I'd learned to temper my expectations, asking only for chocolate cake and maybe having a friend over. Dad got called into an emergency tax meeting that day. At 7, a promised trip to the Science Museum evaporated when Amber's dance class scheduled an extra rehearsal. My 8th birthday remains especially vivid in my memory. Mom had finally agreed to a small backyard party with 5 friends from school. I'd handed out dinosaur-themed invitations a week earlier, buzzing with excitement as I told everyone about the fossil dig activity Mom had planned. The morning of my birthday, I woke early and rushed downstairs to find Mom on the phone, her face apologetic before I even reached the bottom step. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Johnson, but we need to cancel Sammy's party today. My daughter's dance recital was moved up, and we absolutely can't miss it. Sammy understands he's very mature for his age." I wasn't mature. I was devastated. But I quickly learned to hide it when Mom turned to me and said, "You don't mind, right, Sammy? This is Amber's first big recital. We'll celebrate your birthday next weekend." Next weekend never came. Amber, 3 years younger than me, never wanted for celebration. Her 5th birthday featured a princess-themed party at the local children's museum with 25 guests, a professional face painter, and a custom cake that must have cost hundreds of dollars. For her 8th birthday, my parents rented out the entire local swimming pool. Her 10th birthday saw a professional magician performing in our decorated backyard for 30 screaming children while I served punch and helped Mom pass out goodie bags. Amber's more sensitive dad would explain when I questioned the discrepancy. "She needs more encouragement," or my mother's version. "You're our rock, Sammy. You're so independent and understanding." Only my grandmother Eleanor seemed to notice the imbalance. Every year, without fail, a card would arrive with a $20 bill and her elegant handwriting "Happy Birthday" to my special grandson. "Never forget your worth." She'd call too, her voice crackling with age, but warm with genuine interest in my life. By middle school, I'd adopted a strategy of self-protection. I downplayed my birthday. When friends asked about plans, I'd shrug and say, "Nothing special," so they wouldn't know my family had once again forgotten. The day would pass with perhaps a hastily purchased card from my mother, often with the wrong age written inside, and a distracted "Happy Birthday" chant from Dad as he focused on Amber's upcoming events. My high school graduation party serves as another perfect example of the family pattern. My ceremony was on a Saturday morning, and the plan was to have a small gathering at our house afterward. Amber, then 15, had a regional swimming competition the same afternoon. My parents spent the graduation ceremony checking their watches, then rushed me through photos so we could get to Amber's event. The party consisted of a store-bought cake, eaten hastily, before we piled into the car. "We're so proud of you," Mom said, while simultaneously checking that Amber had packed her competition swimsuit. "But you know how important this meet is for your sister's college applications." My 18th birthday, which fell 2 weeks after graduation, went completely unacknowledged as the family focused on preparations for Amber's Sweet 16 the following month. I spent the evening hanging streamers in our living room for her party, while my parents discussed hiring a DJ. When I mentioned it was my birthday, Mom looked genuinely startled. "Oh, Sammy, with everything going on, we'll take you to dinner next week." Next week, of course, never came. These patterns embedded themselves deep in my psyche. I loved my family, but I felt invisible within our unit, the reliable background character in the story of Amber's life. I became the backup child, the Plan B son, who existed to support, to understand, to forgive, and to need nothing. It's a role I performed perfectly for years, burying the hurt so deeply that I sometimes convinced even myself that I didn't care. My decision to attend the University of California wasn't just about their excellent computer science program. It was about putting 3,000 miles between myself and the family dynamic that had slowly suffocated me for 18 years. When the acceptance letter arrived, my parents seemed surprised by my choice. "That's so far away," Mom said, a small furrow appearing between her brows. "We thought you'd choose Connecticut State like your father." Dad cleared his throat. "It's expensive, son." "I got a partial scholarship," I reminded them. "And I'll work part-time. This is what I want." What I didn't say was how desperately I needed to breathe new air to exist in a space where I wasn't perpetually overshadowed. The August morning I left for California remains etched in my memory. Mom hugged me tightly at the airport, her eyes damp. "Call us when you land," she said. Dad clapped me on the shoulder, proud but restrained. Amber, 16, and increasingly self-absorbed, barely looked up from her phone to wave goodbye. Only grandmother Eleanor seemed to truly understand the significance of my departure. "Find yourself out there, Sammy," she whispered, pressing an envelope into my hand. "Remember who you are beyond who they've allowed you to be." The envelope contained $500 and a note that said simply, "For new beginnings." College transformed me. For the first time, I existed in a space where no one knew me as Amber's brother or the perpetually understanding son. My roommate, Brandon Miller, became my first real friend, a lanky engineering student from Oregon with a booming laugh who instantly adopted me into his social circle. Through him, I met Marcus Thompson, who would become my closest confidant over the years. My 19th birthday, the first away from home, caught me by surprise. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone, trained by years of disappointment to keep it quiet, but Brandon had seen my date of birth on university paperwork. "Dude, why didn't you say something?" he exclaimed that morning, throwing a pillow at my head to wake me. "We've got plans tonight." Those plans turned out to be a group of 8 new friends, crowding around a table at a local pizza place, wearing paper party hats, and presenting me with a lopsided chocolate cake they'd baked in the dormitory's communal kitchen. The candles were mismatched, the frosting was uneven, and someone had written, "Happy Birthday, Sammy," in wobbly blue icing. It was perfect. When my phone rang later that evening, I was surprised to see my home number on the screen. My heart lifted momentarily. Perhaps they had remembered after all. "Sammy, honey," Mom's voice came through clear and cheerful. "How are classes going? Dad and I were just talking about you at dinner." "They're good," I replied, waiting for the birthday wishes that didn't come. "That's wonderful. Listen, we're planning Amber's Sweet 16 next month, and I wanted to ask if you could come home that weekend to help. She'd love to have you there." My throat tightened. "I can't, Mom. Midterms." Oh, her disappointment was palpable even across the distance. "Well, maybe you could send a nice video message to play at the party." I agreed, then ended the call, without mentioning what day it was. Later, grandmother Eleanor called, her voice warm with birthday wishes and genuine questions about my new life. "Are you finding your people?" she asked. "Are you learning who Sammy Wilson really is?" My college years progressed with increasing success. I excelled in my computer science program, making the dean's list consistently. Summer internships at tech startups gave me valuable experience and began building my professional network. Each success strengthened my sense of self-worth, independent of family validation. Each birthday away from home was celebrated with friends who valued me without qualification or comparison. My relationship with my family continued in its established pattern. During holiday visits home, I was welcomed warmly, but still existed primarily as a supporting character. Conversations centered around Amber's achievements, her winning the lead in the school play, her college applications, her relationship with her boyfriend Travis. When I shared news of my academic successes or internships, my parents listened politely before redirecting to more familiar territory. When I graduated with honors, my parents arrived late to the ceremony, having been delayed by Amber's college orientation the previous day. They missed hearing my name called, but assured me they were proud. 3 weeks later, the entire extended family attended Amber's high school graduation, where Dad rented a professional photographer and Mom cried openly as Amber delivered the valedictorian speech. My internship at a prestigious tech company in San Francisco after graduation converted to a full-time position with a salary that surprised even me. When I called home with the news, Dad seemed genuinely impressed for the first time. "That's a solid offer for a first job," he said. "Smart negotiating, son." Mom added, "We always knew you'd do well. You've always been so independent." That word again, independent. Not because I had chosen to be, but because I'd had no other option. The summer I turned 25, my parents promised to visit me in California for my birthday. I spent weeks planning the perfect weekend reservations at my favorite restaurants, tickets to a baseball game. Dad would love a day trip to wine country for Mom. 2 days before their scheduled arrival, Mom called, "I hate to do this, Sammy, but we need to cancel our trip. Amber's boyfriend Travis is bringing his parents to meet us for the first time, and we simply can't reschedule. You understand, don't you?" I did understand. All too well. Grandmother Eleanor's health began declining that year, making her annual birthday calls more precious. "I see you, Sammy," she would say, her voice frailer, but her spirit undimmed. "Even when others don't." Through it all, my friendship with Marcus deepened. Unlike others who tried to minimize my family's behavior with platitudes like, "I'm sure they love you," or "families are complicated," Marcus acknowledged the pattern for what it was. "It's not right," he said bluntly one evening, as we sat on my apartment balcony after I'd received yet another birthday brush-off. "You know that, right? It's not because you're more mature or more independent. They've made choices about where to put their attention, and it's okay to be hurt by that." His validation opened something in me. I began seeing a therapist who helped me work through years of accumulated hurt and develop healthier relationships with my self-esteem. I stopped seeking validation from people who had consistently shown they couldn't provide it. And perhaps most importantly, I began limiting what information I shared with my family about my growing success. My career trajectory accelerated faster than I'd anticipated. Within 3 years at my tech company, I'd been promoted twice, moving from junior developer to senior developer on one of our most important projects. My mentor Jeffrey Peterson took a particular interest in my growth. "You've got something special, Sammy," he told me during a performance review. "You solve problems differently, you see angles others miss. But you need to get better at taking credit for your ideas." Jeffrey's observation struck a chord. My lifetime of fading into the background had become so ingrained that I struggled to claim my achievements even in professional settings. With his encouragement, I began finding my voice in meetings, advocating for my ideas, and gradually stepping into leadership roles. Financially, I maintained the discipline that had characterized my college years. While many of my colleagues spent lavishly on luxury apartments in San Francisco's expensive neighborhoods, high-end cars, and weekend trips to Vegas, I lived modestly. I rented a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment in Oakland, commuted by public transit, and cooked most of my meals at home. This wasn't miserliness, it was strategy. Every month I automatically directed 40% of my salary into various investments. I studied the market, carefully made conservative but steady choices, and watched my savings grow. By 26, I had amassed a substantial emergency fund and investment portfolio that my colleagues with their fancier lifestyles might have envied had they known about it. Through all of this growth, the pattern with my family remained unchanged. My 28th birthday fell on the same weekend as Amber's 25th, and my parents decided to throw her a lavish celebration. Not just any celebration, they rented the Grand Ballroom at the Riverside Hotel, hired a live band, and invited over 100 guests. I learned about it the way I learned about most family events these days, through social media. Scrolling through my feed the day after my birthday, which had passed without acknowledgement from my parents, I saw dozens of photos. Mom in an expensive new dress beaming beside Amber. Dad giving a toast, champagne glass raised. Amber and Travis dancing beneath crystal chandeliers. Extended family members I hadn't seen in years all gathered to celebrate. The text from Mom came the following day. "Sorry we missed your birthday. Been so busy with Amber's party. Hope it was a good one." That evening, I called grandmother Eleanor, now residing in an assisted living facility in Connecticut. Her health had deteriorated significantly, but her mind remained sharp. "I saw the photos," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I did too," she replied softly. "I couldn't attend my hip, you know. Sammy, do you remember what I told you when you left for college? To find myself beyond who they've allowed me to be." "And have you?" I thought about my career, my friendships, the life I'd built 3,000 miles from the shadow of my childhood. "I'm working on it." "Good," she said firmly, "because your worth has never been determined by their ability to see it." After that conversation, something shifted in me. I'd spent years in therapy, working through my family issues intellectually, understanding the dynamics at play. But emotionally, I'd continued hoping for change, for recognition for the moment when my parents would finally see me clearly. Grandmother Eleanor's words helped me realize I was still defining myself in relation to their perception. It was time to fully step into my own identity, independent of their validation. I began working with Jeffrey on a new project, an innovative security protocol that could potentially transform how our company protected user data. The work was challenging and absorbing, requiring long hours and intense focus. When it launched successfully, 6 months later, earning accolades throughout the industry, I received a substantial bonus and another promotion, this time to team lead. Through it all, I shared less and less with my family. Our calls grew shorter and more superficial. I deflected questions about my work with vague responses like, "It's going well," or "just busy with the usual stuff." When Amber got engaged to Travis, and the family erupted in excitement, special dinners, engagement parties, endless wedding planning discussions, I offered congratulations and appropriate enthusiasm without mentioning my own achievements. It wasn't petty withholding. It was self-protection. I was building something precious, a sense of self-worth, independent of external validation, and I couldn't risk having it diminished by indifference. Marcus noticed the change in me. "You seem different," he observed during one of our regular dinner meetups. "More grounded somehow." "I've stopped waiting for recognition from people who've spent a lifetime looking past me," I replied. "It's liberating." He raised his glass in a toast. To liberation, then. The promotion to team lead came with a significant salary increase that accelerated my financial plans. What had been a distant dream, owning a property in California's expensive real estate market, suddenly seemed within reach. Not immediately, but with continued discipline and focus, perhaps within a few years. I doubled down on my savings strategy, working occasional weekends and holidays for the overtime pay and consulting on side projects when opportunities arose. My investment portfolio continued to perform well, benefiting from both market growth and my consistent contributions. Every decision I made was calculated, intentional, focused on the long-term goal rather than immediate gratification. 3 months after my 28th birthday, the one overshadowed by Amber's ballroom extravaganza, I was browsing real estate listings out of curiosity when a particular property caught my eye. A beachfront condo in a small coastal community about an hour south of San Francisco. 2 bedrooms, an open-concept living area, and a balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The price was steep, but not entirely out of reach, given my savings. I closed the browser, telling myself it was premature. The responsible approach would be to continue building my financial cushion for another year or two. But the image of that ocean view stayed with me, a persistent whisper of possibility. The following weekend, almost against my better judgment, I drove down to tour the property. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Diane, met me in the lobby of the sleek modern building. "Most of these units were snapped up immediately," she explained, as we rode the elevator to the 4th floor. "This one just came back on the market after the previous buyer's financing fell through." The moment she unlocked the door and I stepped inside, something shifted in my chest. The living room opened onto a balcony with an unobstructed view of the Pacific stretching to the horizon. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating hardwood floors and crisp white walls. The kitchen featured high-end appliances and stone countertops. But it was the master bedroom that sealed my fate, positioned to catch both sunrise and sunset, with the sound of waves as a constant soundtrack. "What do you think?" Diane asked, watching my face. I think I said slowly, "I need to talk to my financial advisor." Over the next week, I ran the numbers, obsessively consulting with both my financial advisor and a mortgage broker. The conclusion was unexpected, but clear. With my savings, excellent credit score, and current income, I could afford this property. It would require adjustments to my budget and postponing some other financial goals, but it was doable. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. After a lifetime of being forgotten, overlooked, and treated as secondary, I was considering purchasing something permanent and undeniable, a physical space that represented success on my own terms. The closing process was a blur of paperwork inspections and anxiety-inducing bank transfers. I told no one but Marcus and Jeffrey, superstitiously afraid that discussing it might somehow jinx the transaction. When I finally signed the last document and received the keys, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company for 15 minutes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd just done. That first night in my new home remains one of the most profound of my life. I hadn't moved in furniture yet, so I sat on the floor of the living room with takeout food and a bottle of champagne Marcus had given me as a housewarming gift. Through the windows, the sun set over the Pacific in a spectacular display of orange and pink, the waves catching fire in the fading light. To finding myself beyond who they've allowed me to be, I toasted aloud to the empty room, echoing Grandmother Eleanor's words. Over the next few weeks, I gradually furnished the space, choosing each piece with care. A comfortable sectional positioned to maximize the ocean view. A dining table large enough for entertaining friends. A desk in the second bedroom, which I converted to a home office facing the water to inspire creativity. My neighbor Linda Harrison introduced herself with a plate of homemade cookies and an easy warmth that immediately put me at ease. A freelance photographer in her mid-30s, she quickly became a friend, often joining me for coffee on my balcony as we watched the morning surf. "This place suits you," she observed one morning. "You seem at home here, in a way that goes beyond just living in a space." Her perception was accurate. This condo represented more than an investment or a place to live. It was tangible proof of my journey, a space that existed solely because of choices I had made, independent of family expectations or approval. I planned a small housewarming gathering with my closest friends Marcus Brandon, who flew in from Portland, where he now lived, Jeffrey and his wife and Linda. The evening was filled with laughter, good food, and a sense of genuine celebration that had nothing to do with obligation or comparison. Throughout all of this, I deliberately maintained my new policy of limited information sharing with my family. Our weekly calls continued brief and superficial. I listened to updates about Amber and Travis's wedding planning, offered appropriate enthusiasm about venue selections and flower arrangements, and deflected questions about my own life with vague assurances that everything was fine. It wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about protecting something precious that I'd built for myself, something I wasn't ready to subject to the familiar pattern of indifference or dismissal. As my 29th birthday approached, I made a decision. For years, I'd waited for acknowledgement that never adequately came. This year, I would acknowledge myself in a way that couldn't be ignored or diminished. I would reveal my new home not with fanfare or explicit attempts to impress, but as a casual fact of my life, exactly the way my family had always treated Amber's achievements, as assumed and expected. The timing, I had to admit, was deliberate. I calculated that posting on my birthday would ensure maximum visibility, as even my family's minimal birthday acknowledgments usually involve social media in some form. The reveal wouldn't be about seeking validation, but about declaring my existence on my own terms. My 29th birthday dawned clear and beautiful, the May sunshine warming my balcony as I enjoyed my morning coffee. The first call came from Grandmother Eleanor, her voice weaker than the previous year, but still warm, with genuine affection. "Happy birthday, my Sammy," she said. 29 years since you came into this world and changed mine for the better." "Thank you, Grandma," I replied, throat tight with emotion. "How are you feeling?" "Oh, well enough to celebrate you today. Tell me about what you're doing to mark the occasion." I described my plans: a day off work, a beach walk, dinner with friends, deliberately omitting any mention of the condo. Grandmother Eleanor was the one family member I trusted implicitly, but I wanted the reveal to be simultaneous for everyone. As expected, the rest of my family maintained their established pattern. Around noon, a text arrived from Mom. Happy 28th birthday, Sammy. Hope it's a good one. I didn't correct the age error. Dad didn't contact me directly, but posted a generic happy birthday son message on my Facebook timeline, the same message he posted every year, suggesting he'd set up an automatic reminder. At 2 in the afternoon, Mom called. I braced myself for the familiar. Sammy, honey, I know it's your birthday, and I hope you're doing something nice for yourself. She began, her tone already telegraphing what was coming. I'm calling because we're having an engagement party planning meeting for Amber and Travis tonight, and we really need your input on the slideshow we're putting together. Could you join us on a family Zoom call? Around 7? Your time? Of course, the planning meeting had been scheduled on my birthday. Of course, they expected me to participate. I'm sorry, Mom, I can't tonight. I've already made plans with friends. A brief silence, then, oh. Well, I suppose that makes sense, it being your birthday. It's just that everyone else was available, and Amber was really hoping you'd be there. Give her my love, I said firmly. But I won't be able to make it tonight. All right then. She sighed, disappointment evident. Have a good birthday. Instead of the family Zoom call, I spent the evening exactly as I'd planned with Marcus Brandon, who had stayed in town after the housewarming, and Linda enjoying a catered dinner in my beautifully furnished condo. We ate on the balcony as the sun set, drinking good wine and sharing stories and laughter. To Sammy, Marcus toasted, raising his glass. Who built this life brick by brick on his own terms? After dinner, as my friends helped clear dishes, I took a series of photos, the casual shots of the celebration, the ocean view at sunset. The 4 of us smiling with glasses raised. I selected the best ones, created a social media post, and carefully composed the caption, "Grateful for another trip around the sun, and for friends who make life richer. Thank you for the birthday celebration in my new beachfront home. Best investment I ever made. Blessed homeowner, ocean views. Birthday celebration." I purposely didn't tag any family members, knowing they would still see it. Then I put my phone away, rejoining my friends for dessert, and deliberately not checking for notifications. It wasn't until the following morning, after my friends had left, and I sat alone with my coffee, watching early surfers tackle the waves, that I allowed myself to look at the responses. The notification count was staggering. Dozens of likes and comments had accumulated overnight, starting with immediate reactions from close friends and colleagues, then expanding to more distant connections as the algorithm spread my post. The first family response came from my cousin Rachel, timestamped just 20 minutes after I'd posted, "What? When did you buy a beachfront condo? It's gorgeous. Happy birthday, cuz." Rachel's comment opened the floodgates. Extended family members, family friends, and distant relatives, I barely remembered, began commenting with variations of surprise and congratulations, many noting they had no idea I'd been so successful. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Your parents are freaking out in the family group chat. Thought you might want to see this." Attached was a screenshot showing a rapid-fire exchange. "Mom, did anyone know? Sammy bought a house, Dad. What house? Where, Amber? Is this some kind of joke? That place looks expensive. Mom, why wouldn't he tell us? We're his parents. Dad, I'm calling him right now." Sure enough, my call log showed 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from my mother, and 1 from Amber. Voicemail notifications lined up like soldiers. I played my mother's message first. "Sammy, it's Mom. We just saw your post about a condo. By the ocean? I don't understand why you wouldn't share something so important with us. We're hurt, honey. Really hurt. Call us back immediately." My father's message was shorter and more direct. "Son, this is your father. We need to talk about this condo situation and why you've been keeping secrets from the family. Call me." Amber's voicemail surprised me with its intensity. "Seriously, Sammy? You couldn't have mentioned this once during all the Zoom calls you've been on? Mom is crying. I hope you're happy with yourself." Within the hour, Amber had posted on her own page. "Feeling betrayed when people you thought you were close to keep huge life changes secret. Family should share important news with family, not random internet friends. Hurt, disappointed." Several relatives commented on her post with supportive messages, creating a parallel narrative of me as the secretive, inconsiderate son who had hurt his family through deliberate exclusion. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being forgotten, overlooked, and treated as an afterthought, my family was suddenly outraged that I hadn't centered them in my achievement. They felt entitled to information I hadn't offered hurt by not being included in a celebration they had never prioritized. I put my phone down and walked to the edge of my balcony, breathing in the salt air. The ocean stretched before me, vast and constant, a reminder that some things remain true regardless of others' perceptions or reactions. This home was mine. This achievement was mine. This moment of recognition, even if it came wrapped in indignation rather than pride, was mine. I decided not to respond immediately. Instead, I spent the day working remotely from my home office, glancing occasionally at the continuing stream of notifications, but not engaging. By evening, my parents had progressed from hurt messages to increasingly urgent demands for a response. "Sammy, we're worried about you. This behavior isn't like you. Please call us. Your mother is very upset. You need to call home today. If we don't hear from you by tomorrow, we're going to have to assume something is seriously wrong." I finally responded with a brief text. "I'm fine. Just busy with work. We'll call on the weekend." That simple boundary, not dropping everything to manage their emotions, felt revolutionary. The doorbell rang at 11 o'clock Saturday morning. I wasn't expecting visitors, and Linda had mentioned she'd be away at a photography assignment all weekend. Peering through the peephole, I froze in disbelief. My parents stood in the hallway, my father shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot, my mother clutching her purse with white knuckles. Behind them, partially obscured, was Amber. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then, taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Surprise," Mom said weakly, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not moving to let them in. "We were worried," Dad said, his tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. "You buy a place like this out of nowhere, then barely respond to our messages. What were we supposed to think? You could have thought I was an adult, making independent decisions," I replied evenly. "But please come in." I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Their expressions as they took in the spacious living area, the high-end finishes, and especially the panoramic ocean view, told me everything. Shock, confusion, and something else, a dawning realization that they didn't know me as well as they'd assumed. "This is quite something," Mom said, finally setting her purse down on the kitchen island. "How long have you lived here?" "About 2 months." 2 months. Amber's voice rose. "You've owned this place for 2 months, and never mentioned it once during all our wedding planning calls." "Yes." "Why wouldn't you tell us about something this significant?" Dad demanded. "We're your family." The question hung in the air, loaded with years of unspoken hurt. I gestured toward the sectional. "Maybe we should sit down." Once everyone was seated, my parents together on the sofa, Amber perched tensely on an armchair, me standing by the windows, Mom leaned forward. "Honey, we're confused. And hurt. This isn't like you keeping secrets. We've always been close. Have we?" The question came out softer than I intended. "Of course we have." Mom looked genuinely bewildered. "We talk every week. We share everything." "You share everything," I corrected. "I listen. There's a difference." Dad frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Taking a deep breath, I decided to finally speak the truth I'd carried for decades. "When was the last time you remembered my birthday without being reminded, or celebrated it with even a fraction of the enthusiasm you've shown for Amber's? When was the last time you asked about my career beyond superficial questions, or showed interest in my life that wasn't an afterthought to Amber's latest achievement?" "That's not fair," Amber interjected. "They're proud of you." "Are they? Because from where I stand, I've been the reliable background character in this family my entire life. The one who's expected to understand when plans get canceled, whose achievements are acknowledged with passing comments, while Amber's are celebrated with ballroom parties. We threw you parties when you were younger." Mom protested weakly. "Name one," I challenged. "One birthday party that wasn't canceled for something related to Amber." The silence that followed was answer enough. "Do you remember my 8th birthday?" I continued, the memories rushing back with startling clarity. "You canceled my dinosaur party the morning of, Because Amber had a dance recital. My 18th passed without acknowledgement while you planned Amber's Sweet 16. Last year you rented a ballroom for Amber's 25th while sending me a text with the wrong age a day late. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We didn't realize. We thought you didn't care about those things. You've always been so independent, so mature. I became independent because I had to be. I interrupted. I became mature because showing disappointment wasn't allowed. I learned early that my feelings mattered less, that my celebrations were optional while Amber's were mandatory. Amber stood up suddenly. That's not true. You're making it sound like they love me more. Don't they? The question hung between us. To my surprise, Dad spoke up. Sammy, we've never meant to make you feel less important. Amber just needed more attention. She was more emotional, more expressive, more valued. I finished for him. The doorbell rang again, interrupting the tense moment. When I opened it, I found Grandmother Eleanor in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse from her assisted living facility. Grandma, what are you doing here? She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Rachel called me, said there was a family situation brewing, figured you might need reinforcements. Despite everything, I laughed, relief washing over me at her familiar, steadfast support. Always looking out for me. Once Grandmother Eleanor was settled in the living room, the dynamic shifted. She had always been the family truth teller, the one person who saw through pretenses and called situations exactly as they were. Catherine. She addressed my mother directly. Douglas. I've watched this pattern for 29 years, and I've spoken to both of you about it many times. Don't pretend this comes as a surprise. Mom flushed. Mother, this isn't helpful. What isn't helpful, Grandmother Eleanor cut in firmly, is continuing to deny what's plainly true. You have consistently prioritized Amber's needs, wants, and achievements over Sammy's s, not because you love him less. I know you don't, but because you've fallen into a pattern you've never had the courage to examine. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Eleanor, with all due respect, we came here to understand why Sammy kept this major purchase secret from us, not to be lectured about our parenting. The two are connected, Douglas, she replied calmly. Sammy kept this achievement private because he's learned from experience that his achievements aren't celebrated the way Amber's are. He protected himself from the pattern of indifference he's come to expect. The blunt assessment landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of uncomfortable recognition through the room. Mom began to cry in earnest. Dad stared at the floor, and Amber, to my genuine shock, nodded slowly. She's right, Amber said quietly. I've known it for years, even if I didn't want to admit it. I always got the bigger celebrations, the more enthusiastic responses, the priority positioning in family decisions. Her admission stunned me into momentary silence. You knew, I finally managed. She met my eyes directly. By high school, definitely. It was uncomfortable to acknowledge, so I just didn't. It was easier to accept the attention than question it. Why are you admitting this now? I asked, genuinely curious. Amber gestured around the beautifully appointed condo. Because this makes it impossible to maintain the fiction anymore. You've built this incredible life completely independently, while I'm still counting on Mom and Dad for wedding planning and emotional support at 26. It's embarrassing, honestly. Mom looked up, tear tracks marking her face. Sammy, I don't know what to say, except I'm sorry. We never meant to make you feel less important or less loved. Intentions don't change impact. I replied, the phrase borrowed from countless therapy sessions. I built this life because I had to. I learned to validate myself because external validation wasn't reliably available. Are you punishing us? Dad asked suddenly. Is that what this is about? Making us feel bad by keeping secrets? The question might have angered me once, but now I just felt tired. No, Dad. I'm not punishing you. I'm living my life on my terms, making choices based on what I've learned about our family dynamic. I didn't tell you about the condo because I wanted to enjoy this achievement without it being diminished or overshadowed. We would have been happy for you, he insisted. Would you? Or would it have been acknowledged with a quick, that's nice, before returning to Amber's wedding plans? His silence was telling. Grandmother Eleanor reached for my hand again. Sammy has never needed to punish any of you. Life has a way of revealing truths in its own time. The fact that you're all sitting here now confronted with the reality of the dynamic you've created, that's not punishment. That's natural consequence. The conversation continued for hours, moving through phases of denial, anger, sadness, and eventually tentative understanding. We ordered takeout as afternoon stretched into evening, the discussion punctuated by periods of emotional exhaustion and renewed determination to speak honestly. By the time my family finally prepared to leave, something had shifted, not resolved completely, but acknowledged in a way that couldn't be undone. Mom hugged me tightly at the door. "We have a lot of work to do," she whispered. "But I want you to know I see you now. I really see you." Dad shook my hand, then pulled me into an awkward embrace. "The place is impressive, son. You've done well for yourself. Better than I managed at your age." Amber lingered after our parents stepped into the hallway. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for my part in all of this, for not speaking up when I noticed the imbalance, for accepting preferential treatment without questioning it." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, surprised by her maturity. "It means a lot." After they left, Grandmother Eleanor stayed a while longer, her nurse agreeing to return for her later. We sat on the balcony watching the moonlight on the waves. "You did well today," she said, patting my hand. "It takes courage to speak your truth after so many years of silence." "I'm not sure anything will really change," I admitted. "Perhaps not everything," she agreed. "Patterns that deep aren't broken in a day. But awareness is the beginning of transformation. You've given them a gift today, even if it didn't feel like one. A gift. The opportunity to see themselves clearly, perhaps for the first time. What they do with that clarity is up to them. But you," she gestured toward the ocean view, "you've already done the work of building a life based on self-knowledge and inner strength. That's the real achievement here." After Grandmother Eleanor left, I stood alone on my balcony. Emotions washing through me like the waves below relief. Exhaustion, lingering, anger, and something else that felt surprisingly like hope. Not hope that my family would suddenly transform, but hope that I had finally released the burden of unspoken truth I'd carried for so long. Whatever happened next, I had claimed my story on my own terms. And that perhaps was the most significant victory of all. The weeks following that confrontation unfolded in unexpected ways. Initially, communication with my family was awkward, tentative text messages and brief phone calls characterized by careful phrasing and conscious effort. It reminded me of physical therapy after an injury, painful, deliberate movements designed to rebuild strength in damaged connections. Mom began sending me thoughtful messages that had nothing to do with Amber's wedding. "Saw this article about your company in the business section and thought of you," or "the sunset here tonight made me wonder what the view from your balcony looks like right now." Small gestures, but noticeable in their specificity. Dad, less comfortable with emotional expression, approached reconnection through practical channels. "Thinking about adjusting my investment portfolio. Any recommendations on tech stocks worth looking at?" It was his way of acknowledging my financial acumen, clumsy, but genuine. Amber surprised me most. 3 weeks after the confrontation, she called with an unexpected request. "I'd like to come visit. Just me. No mom and dad, no Travis. Would that be okay?" She arrived on a Friday afternoon, noticeably nervous, as she stepped into my condo. "This place is even more amazing the second time," she said, setting down her overnight bag. "When you're not in the middle of a family meltdown and can actually appreciate it." We spent the weekend gradually rebuilding a relationship that had never really existed in its own right, separate from our parents' influence. Walking on the beach, cooking meals together, talking about our lives, beyond the superficial updates of family calls. I learned about her genuine anxieties about marriage, her creative ambitions beyond the corporate marketing job she'd taken to please our parents. She listened to stories about my college years, my career challenges, the friendships that had sustained me. "I don't think I ever really knew you," she admitted, as we sat on my balcony Saturday night. "I knew the version of you that existed in relation to me, my older brother, my parents' son, but not you as your own person." I could say the same, I acknowledged. "You were always the golden child, the center of attention. I never looked past that role to see who you actually were." She winced at golden child but nodded. "Fair assessment. I'm trying to figure out who I am beyond that role now. It's harder than I expected." By Sunday evening, when she left, something new had formed between us, not the close sibling bond that might have developed under different circumstances, but a foundation of mutual respect and genuine interest that held promise for the future. A month later, I received an unexpected text from Mom. "Your father and I would like to host a dinner for your 30th birthday next May. Nothing elaborate, just family. Would you be open to that?" The invitation represented both an acknowledgement of past failures and a tentative step toward change. I accepted with cautious optimism. As summer turned to fall, I continued building my life in the coastal community I now called home. My friendship with Linda evolved into something deeper, beginning with a sunset kayak trip that ended with a kiss that felt like possibility. My career advanced further when Jeffrey recommended me to lead a new development team. Grandmother Eleanor's health stabilized enough for her to make monthly video calls, her wisdom continuing to anchor me through this period of transformation. Throughout it all, I worked on my own healing, recognizing that while my family's behavior had wounded me, my response to that wounding was now my responsibility. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose how those experiences shaped my future relationships, including the evolving one with my family. By Christmas, the changes were subtle but significant. When I visited Connecticut for the holidays, I noticed my parents making conscious efforts to balance their attention. My achievements were discussed alongside Amber's wedding plans. My gift, a framed professional photograph of my condo's ocean view at sunset that Linda had taken, showed thoughtfulness I hadn't experienced before. Not everything changed. Old habits emerged in unguarded moments. A conversation drifting toward Amber's concerns. An assumption about my availability to help with family matters. The difference was that these patterns were now visible to everyone, and sometimes acknowledged with rueful smiles and course corrections. "Sorry," Mom would say, catching herself. "I'm doing it again, aren't I?" As my 30th birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The beachfront condo purchase that had catalyzed so much change now felt less like a declaration of independence and more like the natural result of choices made with self-knowledge and intention. I no longer needed it to prove anything to my family or myself. The birthday dinner my parents hosted was modest by their standards, just family at their home, rather than an expensive restaurant or rented venue. But it was the first birthday celebration they had organized for me in memory, and the effort behind it meant more than any elaborate party could have. To Sammy, Dad toasted, raising his glass. 30 years of quiet strength that we didn't always see, but are grateful for nonetheless. Later that evening, Grandmother Eleanor pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Are you happy, Sammy?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Not just with how things are changing with the family, but with your life." I considered the question carefully. "I'm at peace," I answered finally. "I've built a life that reflects who I am rather than who others expected me to be. That feels like success to me." She nodded, satisfied. "That's what I've always wanted for you. Not external validation, but internal certainty." As spring bloomed, Linda and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something that felt like it could last. My career continued its upward trajectory. My relationship with my family, while still navigating occasional rough patches, maintained its course of gradual healing. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth against my family's ability to see it. The desperate need for acknowledgement that had driven so many of my choices had transformed into something healthier, a quiet confidence that my value existed independently of others' recognition. On a particularly beautiful morning, almost a year after the confrontation that had changed everything, I stood on my balcony, watching the sunrise paint the ocean, gold and pink. In that moment of perfect stillness, I realized the most important lesson of my journey. True self-worth isn't found in grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but in the daily choice to honor your own experience and truth. My family hadn't forgotten my birthday this year, but more importantly, I had remembered my own value every day between one birthday and the next, and that I now understood was the gift I had given myself. Have you ever had to create your own celebration when others forgot what matters to you? Or have you found yourself building something meaningful without waiting for validation from those who've overlooked you? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful growth happens when we stop waiting for others to see our worth and start honoring it ourselves. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Your journey matters, and I'm grateful you chose to spend part of it with me today.